But it also speaks to the notion that John Boehner, when he says we're not interested in immigration, even if we were to, immigration in impeachment, even if we were to believe him, it's quite clear that he doesn't have the ability to make that decision. He is, talk about leading from behind. This guy's not even on the same bus, never mind not driving it as his Republican caucus. And we saw the passage of a bill which would allow the House to sue the president. It's different than we've seen in the past because we've only seen individual lawmakers sue the president, which usually get thrown out because the lawmakers lack standing. Again, you still may have the same principle, it seems to me, applies to Congress as a whole, because they cannot prove that they've been harmed, particularly in this case, by the delaying of a mandate that they wanted to delay in the first place.
That is what even more ridiculous about the whole thing. I mean, it is all such a waste of time and effort. I mean, what these guys do is ridiculous enough normally, but the only thing they could figure out to go after him about was delaying the employer mandate, which is something they wanted him to do. And so they're suing him, but they don't have standing almost definitively. They're not being hurt by it. And it's just the whole thing is. I mean, again, that's the kind of bill they can pass. But when we've got a crisis on our border, and a humanitarian crisis, when it's a problem that simply isn't going to go away. You can close your eyes. It's kind of like abstinence only. Okay, people will stop having sex. Make marijuana illegal. Yep, they'll stop smoking it. Gun violence, let's ignore it. It'll go away. The biggest one of all, perhaps, climate change. Ignore it. It'll go away. These things don't go away. These kids, by ignoring them there and not doing something about this, they're not going to just go away.
And today on Morning Joe, Tom Cole, who is a Republican for Oklahoma and considered a very close ally of Boehner's, was asked. I'm not sure who it was that asked him on the panel, but yesterday when they couldn't pass the bill, Boehner basically said there are plenty of administrative things that the president can do and should be doing at the border. But this is the day after you have sued the president for taking administrative action. And Cole admitted, he said, look, you can't say on one hand that the president is overreaching by acting without legislative authority and then refuse to give him legislative authority in another area. And so, it just shows how ridiculous it is. And, good for the Democrats for taking finally some political advantage to this and using this stuff as, it's not as much as I would like them to see. I'd like them to have a proactive agenda, but at the very least, they're exploiting the Republican ridiculousness, in hopes to raise money and drive people to the polls. I don't know if it's going to work. It's fairly weak tea as far as these things is going, but at least they're, to stretch out the analogy, brewing something.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said there. I mean, I would much rather they had a proactive agenda. You don't need a contract with America, kind of goofball Frank Luntz-y thing. You just offer 5 things that are important to you. Say these are the 5 measures that we're going to fight to pass between now and November, whatever, and they could have done that 6 months ago. And made it very clear. We stand for the minimum wage. We stand for, equality of pay for women. We stand for immigration reform. These are all good things for the economy, by the way. And when I say we stand for the minimum wage, I mean raising it, not where it is. That's what the Republicans stand for, or eliminating it. In the case of Tom Tillis, I believe, from North Carolina. Mm-hmm. But that would be better. But even in the absence of that, maybe we're expecting too much from the Democrats. They are handling this well. They are raising money off of this. They are going to make this an issue. And again, this is an election about motivating people to come out. And the way you motivate people when you're trying to come out is by again and again showing them what will happen if these vandals, who you've already given one house you've already handed over one house of our legislature to, and you've already handed over the Supreme Court to, also take control of the second part of our legislature, and thereby wield control of both. Impeachment will be on the table because, as you pointed out, John Boehner can't control them. So it doesn't really matter what John Boehner wants, what Ted Cruz wants, what Mike Lee wants, what Jim Inhofe wants. That's what's going to determine what happens, and their counterparts in the House, who are every bit as crazy. And, there's a good article in the Daily Beast today. Was it David Freelander? I'm trying to remember who wrote it. Maybe I'm getting mixed up. But it was about, and he sort of went around and looked at all the different races in which this has become the new litmus test in Republican primaries. If you don't say you're for impeachment, you're in trouble.
Oh, I hadn't seen it. Now let's play this out for a second, okay? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but all right, let's presume that the Republicans take the Senate or they don't take the Senate. I'm not sure that it matters too much, right? You've got Ted Cruz.
In terms of impeaching happens in the House, convicting happens in the Senate.
Indeed. And the only dynamic there is whether or not it's a freebie for the Republicans in the Senate, right? Because if they don't control the Senate, they know that they won't be able to convict the president. Now, there is no reason to believe that at least a large portion of the Republican caucus sees any downside at all to impeachment. These are people whose seats are fairly protected, A, and B, they're not just fairly protected against a vote for impeachment. They're more protected with a vote for impeachment. And,
that's right.
And think about Ted Cruz here. All right, Ted Cruz has the ability now to go over to the Republican House and scuttle a bill that they desperately need to pass. And what's Ted Cruz's agenda in terms of impeachment? If you're Ted Cruz and you know you're running against Rand Paul and you want to make sure that you have full access to the crazies in the Republican Party, you want to prove that Rand Paul is a pretender, right? And I think Rand Paul is starting to get aware of this because he's starting to try and moderate his positions on certain things.
Right.
If I'm Ted Cruz, I want Rand Paul to have to take that impeachment vote because it does not hurt Ted Cruz one iota to vote for impeachment.
No, he's trying to stake out the territory on the far right.
And
it can only help him. You're pointing it out, and some of his lieutenants, the other guys who are there with him, if Joni Ernst gets elected, she's now said impeachment should be on the table. From Iowa, she's basically Iowa's version of Ted Cruz. She'll be right there with him. You'll have a good, again, think about how many of these even in the Senate, how many of them you trust. And yeah, they'd lose eventually, but I wouldn't be surprised. They want to take that vote in the Senate, as you point out. And in the House, I don't see, obviously it does depend somewhat on what happens in these midterms. Maybe they lose a few seats and you get about 10 or 15 Republicans scared in their moderate-esque districts, the few that are left. Maybe it barely fails in the House, but I don't see how they fail in taking that vote. Why they wouldn't take that vote. You either wouldn't do it because you thought it's going to hurt you, as you pointed out, either won't or hurt you not to take the vote because these people are in safe, crazy districts.
And we know the majority of Republicans are still for impeachment.
Right, and then 57%, a strong majority. Or otherwise, you'd actually have to have respect for the Constitution, our process of government, and the history of this country. And they've proven they have none of that. As much as they love to fetishize the supposed Constitution that doesn't exist, the one that they talk about all the time, the actual one and the actual, the way this country works, they've proven they've learned nothing from when they did it to Bill Clinton and potentially occupied his time dealing with this silliness during a time when a foreign terrorist organization was targeting us. They don't care.
But here's the thing:
they don't think about anything.
I think the lesson from '98 is overblown. Frankly, look, people forget Clinton still left the presidency. It may have helped Clinton's legacy on some level, but I'm not convinced that the lesson. First of all, the situation's not the same, and I don't know what the lesson. It probably hurt Gore, frankly. And help George Bush's election help. It certainly, I think that's almost undeniable.
Well, it did. Gore ran away from him. And he ran away from him because he was impeached.
And brought Joe Lieberman on the ticket to inoculate him from it. And from that entire thing. But also, you have to remember here that I don't think there's anybody in the Republican Party cared about winning the president in 2016. in some type of general, they wouldn't be doing any of this. And
That's right, but
they're
as you
going for the
pointed out
off-year
already,
elections.
It's in Ted Cruz's interest, who, if he wants to be president,
He wants to get on that debate stage and say, Senator Paul, why wouldn't you vote? Do you really think that President Obama hasn't played fast and loose with our Constitution? Why would you vote against impeachment? I mean,
what
that's
about Benghazi and Fast and Furious, and they can go on and on.
Don't you know
Solyndra,
that Lois Lerner thinks that guys like Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin are a-holes? I mean, impeachment.
That's right. There's no loss for him because he thinks people think like he does. He clearly has like the emotional IQ of a child. And if he were the Republican nominee, the Democratic nominee would probably win 48 states because even most of I'm exaggerating a little bit, but even most of the Republicans get him off the record. They'll tell you they think the guy's a complete a-hole.
Right.
Nobody likes Ted Cruz. It doesn't really matter though. What matters is what Ted Cruz wants right now because he controls things. And in every motivation, every incentive that you've brought up, everything I can think of is for them in both the House and the Senate to attempt to impeach and to convict.